Is there anybody going to listen to my story? All about the girl who came to stay. She's the kind of girl you want so much it makes you sorry. Still you don't regret a single day. Oh girl, girl, girl. When I think of all the times I tried so hard to leave her, she would turn to me and start to cry. And she promises the earth to reunite. Believe her, after all this time I don't know why. Oh girl, girl, girl. She's the kind of girl who puts you down when friends are there. You feel a fool when you say she's looking good. She acts as if it's understood. She's cool. Did she understand it when they said that a man must break his back to earn his day of leisure? Will she still believe it when he's dead? Oh girl, girl, girl.
Hello, Marc Daniel Nelson here with Make My Music. It has been a long bit of time since my last video, but this one's actually a pretty cool, exciting video to bring to you guys. So, some of the cool things we like to do every once in a while is do covers of our favorite songs, and we did just that. Myself, my friend Luke Ratley on drums, Clay Blair from Boulevard on bass, Lou Samaniego, and Chad Clifford, who are two of my longtime old pals on background vocals, Sam Popkin on guitar, and Perry Stanley on the 12-string. Band of friends, all of us kind of hanging out, doing some good music for the better of the world. My favorite song of the month has been Girl by the Beatles. It's always been one of those songs that seems extremely simple, but yet has this real complex side to it. What it sounds like is the guys in the studio playing together, but after a bunch of analyzing and going deeply into it, we find that it seems a little more complicated, and I'm not totally sure what was going on there. What it sounds like is John's playing guitar and vocals, Paul's playing bass. There is overdubs with George, and Ringo's playing drums. But in typical Beatle fashion, when you start analyzing, getting deep into it, we found that there was a couple things. One was the main guitar solo, the first guitar solo. Everyone assumes that maybe it was a 12-string. Sam Popkin thinks it's most likely a double 6-string, probably the J160. And the second thing is the drums in general just have this sense of lightness, but then they crack as if one time they feel brushy, and then the next time they feel like a snare is being hit with a stick. This could have been one of those times where they did a rhythm track with Ringo on brushes, and then they overdub some other ornaments, possibly the crash cymbal in the bridge with the hiccup kick drum. Because what we found was Luke and Ryan Herma, who's my co-partner of the last 15 years, recorded the drums in Chicago, and that some of the parts was just really almost impossible to get right, like the bridge and the kick drum pickup. So we're going to kind of analyze that. The first thing I did was track the vocals and guitar on my own. I used a U47 and a 269 acoustic guitar. going into the Audioscape Golden preamp. That's a tube preamp that has a ton of color. So I was trying to go in the vein of something that they would have done, like the Red Console, which I believe was Telefunken style preamps. Very, very colored, thick sounding preamps. So I chose the Audioscape for that reason. I also went through the analog AT101 on my vocal just to get a little more compression sound of the Fairchild. And I felt by pulling those together, I got pretty good representation of that track. Reaching out to a bunch of my friends, adding elements to it, like Clay putting the bass. He is so finicky at getting the exact tone right on a Rickenbacker that he went great miles to get it really, really dialed in. And it really shows. The one thing to talk about, though, is this isn't supposed to be an identical sonic sound-alike. There's a couple different mixes of this original track, including the newest one that's been put up on the Red album, released last year. And they all sound kind of different. What I wanted to do was create a vibe that was familiar, that sounded very similar, but not identical, almost a modern approach with some of the elements mixed in. So what I did was I used a lot of Abbey Road plugins because the character of these just instantly gave me a familiar place to start with. And we can go over that. Another secret weapon I used on this track was I printed a lot to analog tape. This ATR700 I have here really does kind of showcase the elements I was able to get out of the digital tracks to create a little bit more character and a little bit more vibe. And I printed those in so we can talk about those. I will be sharing the multi-tracks as well, so you can fool around and mix it till your day's delight. Let's take a listen. First and foremost, jumping into the track, I have Luke playing the normal drum part and as well this pickup part, which was the kick pickup thing that was going on in the bridge. That was something that he said, him and Ryan said, that was really hard to replicate just going on the one pass. So what we did was we just added a little overdub there. But the plugins I used is really subtle. Some EQ, some curve EQ. On the main bus, we used a little bit of this 3751 and the Fairchild 660 to squeeze the drums out. After I had the drum sound, I ended up printing it to tape and bringing it back on a track here. These three elements of the mix, I felt the digital form were great, but I wanted to create a little more character and vibe. So I used the bass, acoustic guitar, my guitar, and the drums with analog print tracks, and the vocals and the overdub guitars as the normal digital tracks, because I felt like it didn't need as much color and saturation. But for fun, let's listen to the drums as digital and then listen to it at the analog tape print, just so you can hear what's going on. So here's the drums in digital. And then this is the print of the exact same part. You can hear that there's some saturation happening now. The low end is bumped a little bit more. It's a little more smooth. And the hits on the snare are a little more even. I take these out. What we found was the red plugin seems to add a little bit of grit that I liked on the drum set. These drums were tracked with a big giant bottle and some other microphones at a studio that had really, really good gear. So everything came in really clean and punchy. And we had to decide how do you make it a little more grimy without it sounding distorted and elements like that. One of the aspects I always loved about this console plugin was the drive function. So if you listen to it, it's got some vibe to it. If I take out the channel, you can just get a little more feeling of like some tightness out of that. And I think that's really critically important when you're trying to get the sound of the drums. Now down to Clay's bass. Clay plays a Rickenbacker that he says is accurate to what Paul would have used at the time. And he recorded with either a Bassman or a Vox amplifier. I don't remember. Knowing him, it was accurate to what it was. Once I got the track, I still felt like it was still a little clean. Just knowing and listening to some of the samples and multitracks of Beatles stuff. Sometimes the bass seems to have a lot more modulation and low kind of funky things going on that is not necessarily as clean as you think it would be traditionally. So what I did was, if I take everything out of my chain, this is the bass without anything and digital. I mean, it's already nailed, but how do we get it even closer to the track? Pulled in the Altec, which I believe they used for bass at the time at Abbey Road, back to the 51, just to get a little EQ and a little console saturation, just a little bit of correction on this bass because it has this really interesting note around the G. But how do we get it even more cool, more vibey? Well, printing it to tape. Now, what I did here, printing it to tape, if you listen, it's obviously a lot more round and a lot more clean, but there is a lot of modulation and problems going on. There's crosstalk happening and stuff like that. And how I got that sound was I ended up using a specific tape that has been used so much that the resolution on the analog channel of the tape was so abrasive and kind of broken that it came through on the print. I didn't use that on the drums. I didn't use it on the acoustic guitar, but I used it on bass. So thinking about it as like a formula change on the tape style can totally create different effects as well. Now, the acoustic guitar, I tracked that in here with the 269. Very simple, really clean and beautiful sounding. I have it on tape, but if I go up to the actual track, what I found was that it just didn't have a lot of, vibe in the sense. It was very clean and it sounded beautiful for whatever era we're in now. But I know that as this track was just drums, bass, guitar, and voice pretty much 80% of the time, that the acoustic guitar needed to be able to sit in a manner that it didn't feel compressed and at the same point also kind of character enough to stand on its own. I pulled up the 37 on the console. I pulled a Abbey Road vinyl in just to add a little bit more character. The J37 on tape at 15 IPS with the 815 as the formula, and a de-esser. Now the de-esser I had just taking off just a little bit of that airiness because it just felt like it was just too spiky for the era. So if I took out these guys and just played the acoustic guitar on its own, it sounds like this. No reverb, no additional anything. Here's the first EQ I added. I did a little bit of the shift here where I took some of the top end out, added some bottom end, and took a lot of that meat of the middle out. Adding this channel in. It's not doing it terrible enough, but it does have a little bit of the drive circuit in there. Now here's some fun. Here's this Abbey Road vinyl plugin that normally you wouldn't put on certain things, but I felt it added some pretty cool character. It's almost more compressed without compression. Without. And then the J37 tape. And here's the de-esser. Now the de-esser again is just taking a tiny bit off. I've got two reverbs here that's kind of unique. The plate, which I know they didn't use a lot of, but I like the color of it and the darkness of it. I turned some of that top end down. It adds a little bit of space to things. The other thing, which I thought was kind of cool, was the Sound City room reverb. Now if I take the reverb off of the plate and turn on the room, you can hear that it's the size of a very large room by itself. Knowing the guitar was being played in Studio 2 or 3, I don't remember which studio they tracked the song Girl in, but knowing both rooms were fairly large, there was going to be some space around the acoustic guitar that I wanted to bring back, just subtly. And then again, I ended up printing the acoustic to analog tape. And we got ourselves a stew, bass, drums, and acoustic guitar. My friends Chad and Lou, who were longtime pals from outside of Chicago, where I grew up. These guys were a handful of years older than me, like 10 years. And when I was growing up, both of them were massive Beatles fans. One sounded like Paul to me, one sounded like John. And they were very big, influential pals of mine to show me how to do certain things when I started writing music when I was young. So I thought it'd be really fun to bring both of those guys in and do background vocals. Now going into my voice, there's a double on the choruses and the bridge. Do a little bit of correction on the frequency because I think where I had my mic, I was bouncing off of something that was causing some really weird high frequency flamminess. So I ended up putting some of that to shame. And on the main channel, I did a global low mid tuck, the 660, and a de-esser. And that's it. Going into the plate. Really simple.
Anybody going to listen to my story? All about the girl who came to stay. She's the kind of girl you want so much it makes you sorry. Still you don't regret a single day. Oh girl, girl, girl. When I think of all the times I tried so hard to leave her, she would turn to me and say,
let's listen to Sam's lead guitar here. It's the 160 and it's going to be doubled. I like the LA3A because it's kind of taming that pokiness. Now if I put the double in, it starts getting phasey and chorusy in a good way. And at the end, if I pull up Perry's 12 string, I just have a little bit of kind of upper mids tuck because it was kind of honky the way it was tracked. That's pretty much it. In a nutshell, this was just a really fun track to work on with the guys and have fun with the multi-tracks. This is all about just having fun with the music. Enjoy mixing.